Everyone abandoned the blind billionaire to die until a homeless fugitive found him. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Before we continue, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in New York, Jamaica, maybe South Africa or Canada? We'd love to hear from you. When James Williams lost his sight, 14 people worked inside his mansion. A private chef, 2 housekeepers, a personal assistant, a driver, security staff. People who smiled at him every morning and called him the greatest man they'd ever known. Within 6 weeks, every single one of them was gone. Some left in the middle of the night so they wouldn't have to face him. His personal assistant of 9 years sent her resignation by text and never came back. His own cousin was overheard on the phone saying, "He's finished. Move the assets before he runs everything into the ground." The man inside that mansion was worth $1.2 billion, and he was completely alone. Not the kind of alone where a man prefers quiet. The kind of alone where the world has already decided you're dead. It was on a Thursday night, the same night the last security guard folded his uniform on the kitchen counter and locked the gate behind him for good, that Grace Anderson climbed the iron fence at the back of the property. She wasn't there for money, she wasn't there to save anyone, she was running. Behind her, somewhere beyond the tree line, sirens cut through the night, 2 of them, maybe 3, getting closer. Grace pressed herself against the cold hallway wall and held her breath. She needed to move deeper into the house, find a small dark room, curl up and disappear until morning. But her feet wouldn't move. Through the doorway of the living room, in the faint silver moonlight pouring through the tall glass windows, she could see him clearly now. A tall man with deep brown skin and broad shoulders, standing perfectly still in the middle of an enormous room. One hand pressed flat against the edge of a marble side table, the other gripping a white cane so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. He wore a soft cashmere sweater and linen pants, the kind of clothes that whispered money without raising their voice. But his eyes told a different story entirely. They were open, cloudy, unfocused, staring at nothing. At his feet, a glass pitcher lay shattered across the marble floor. Water spread outward in a dark pool, carrying dozens of razor-sharp shards that caught the moonlight like scattered teeth. He couldn't see any of it. Grace watched him shift his weight forward. His right foot lifted slightly, hovering just above the glass. One more step and he would come down directly onto it. Bare feet in house slippers that thin, on shards that sharp, he would bleed before he even understood what had happened. Every survival instinct Grace had built over the last 7 months screamed at her to stay silent. She was a fugitive. She was trespassing in a stranger's home. If she made a single sound, this man could call the police, and everything she had endured, every night sleeping under bridges, every meal scraped together from nothing, every hour spent running from something she didn't do, would end in a cell. She watched his foot lower another inch. The glass was right there, a long curved piece, sharp as a blade, pointing straight up. Grace closed her eyes. She thought about the sirens outside getting closer. She thought about handcuffs and courtrooms and a system that had already decided she was guilty before she ever opened her mouth. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the man standing alone in that enormous, empty, beautiful room, and she made her choice. "Stop," she said. Her voice came out louder than she intended, cutting through the silence like a crack in stone. "Don't move, there's glass everywhere." The man froze. His head snapped toward her voice with the sharp precision of someone whose hearing had become everything. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped the cane like a weapon. "Who's there?" he said. His voice was low, controlled, but underneath it was something harder. The voice of a man who had stopped trusting the sound of other people a long time ago. "Who is in my house?" Grace stood in the doorway, heart pounding, sirens wailing in the distance, and said nothing, because she had absolutely no idea how to answer that question. Grace swallowed hard. The sirens outside were fading now, moving east away from the property, but they would circle back. They always circled back. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said carefully. "I just needed somewhere to." "To what?" James cut her off. His voice hadn't softened even slightly. "To hide, to steal. You broke into my house in the middle of the night. Give me one reason I shouldn't call the police right now." The word police hit her like a fist. She took a half step backward toward the hallway, toward the side door, toward the darkness outside that she knew how to survive in, even if it was slowly killing her. "Please don't," she said quietly. Something in those 2 words made James pause, not the words themselves but the way she said them. There was no performance in it, no manipulation, just a woman standing in a dark room asking a stranger for something she had no right to ask for. "You're running from them," he said. It wasn't a question. Grace said nothing, which was an answer in itself. James tilted his head slightly, the way a man who cannot see learns to listen with his whole body. He was reading her. Not her face, not her clothes, not anything the eyes could offer. He was reading the sound of her breathing, the distance in her voice, the way her feet shifted on the marble. "You told me to stop," he said slowly. "You could have stayed hidden. I didn't know you were here. You could have let me walk into that glass and used the noise to slip out the back. But you didn't." Grace looked at the shards, still glittering on the floor between them. "I couldn't," she said simply. James was quiet for a long time. The house settled around them, all that marble and glass and empty space holding its breath. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was different now. Not warm, not trusting, but something had shifted. The sharp edge had pulled back just enough to let a question through that wasn't a weapon. "Grace," she said, "Grace Anderson." "Grace," he said it like he was turning it over in his mind, testing its weight. "I'm going to say something and I want you to listen carefully. This house has 50 rooms. I can navigate approximately 4 of them without breaking something or falling. My staff is gone, every single one. My family visits only when they want something signed. I have not had a conversation with another human being in 11 days. He paused. "You need somewhere to hide. I need someone who can be honest with me without treating me like I'm already in a coffin." And Grace stared at him. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you stopped a stranger from bleeding on his own floor when staying silent was the safer choice," James said. "That tells me more than a resume ever would." He shifted his grip on the cane. "Do we have a deal?" Grace looked at the dark hallway behind her, then at the blind man standing alone in his enormous, empty house. "Yes," she said. The first morning was careful and quiet, the way 2 strangers move around each other when trust is something neither of them can afford to give easily. Grace slept in a small guest room on the ground floor behind the kitchen. She didn't unpack because she had nothing to unpack. She woke before sunrise, washed her face with cold water, tied her hair back in a simple ponytail, and went to find James. He was already in the kitchen, standing in front of the counter with one hand flat on the surface and the other reaching slowly, carefully, for a cabinet that was 6 inches to the left of where his fingers were searching. He didn't hear her come in, or maybe he did and chose not to acknowledge it. She watched him for a moment. His jaw was tight. His shoulders were set in a hard line. This was not a man who wanted to be watched while he struggled. "The cabinet is to your left," Grace said from the doorway, "about a hand's width." His fingers stopped. He shifted left, found the handle, opened it. He didn't say thank you. She didn't expect him to. That became the pattern of their first days together. Grace didn't hover. She didn't rush forward every time he reached for something or guide his hands like he was a child learning to walk. She stayed nearby, gave him directions when he needed them, and stayed quiet when he didn't. On the second morning, she began describing the rooms to him. Not in the careful, pitying voice he clearly despised, but the way a person might describe a road to someone driving. "There's a side table about 4 steps ahead of you, slightly to the right. The leg sticks out. The hallway turns left here. The floor changes from marble to wood. Your coffee is at 2 o'clock on the counter, handle facing you." James said very little during those first days, but Grace noticed that he stopped bumping into the side table. He began walking the hallway turn without hesitating. He reached for his coffee at 2 o'clock without needing to be told twice. He was memorizing everything she said. On the 3rd evening, she was cleaning the glass from the living room floor, the same shattered picture from the night they met. She had found a broom in the utility closet and was sweeping the last shards into a dustpan when James appeared in the doorway. "You're still cleaning that," he said. "Some pieces went under the bookshelf," she said. "I wanted to make sure you could walk through here safely." He was quiet for a moment, then he said something she wasn't expecting. "The others used to move things out of my way without telling me. They rearranged entire rooms so I wouldn't have to learn where anything was." He paused. "You don't do that." "That's because it's your house," Grace said simply. "You should know where everything is." James stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he nodded once slowly and turned back down the hallway. He walked it without touching the wall. "It happened on the 5th day." Grace was in the kitchen preparing lunch, slicing bread the way James preferred it, thick and even when she heard the sound. Distant at first, then closer. The low, steady wail of a police siren moving along the road outside the property. Her hands stopped, the knife hung in the air above the cutting board. Her whole body went rigid, every muscle locking into the same position she had trained herself to hold for 7 months whenever that sound appeared. Perfectly still, perfectly silent, invisible. The siren grew louder. Then a second one joined it. 2 cruisers, close together, moving slowly along the road that ran past the front gates of the mansion. Grace set the knife down with shaking hands and backed away from the window. She pressed herself against the far wall, away from any line of sight, her breathing quick and shallow. Her eyes were locked on the tall glass windows, watching for flashing lights, watching for the moment they would turn in through the gate and come for her. The sirens passed. They kept going, fading east, growing smaller until the house swallowed the silence again. Grace didn't move. She stood against the wall with her arms wrapped around herself and her chest rising and falling too fast, and she couldn't make it stop. That was how James found her. He came into the kitchen the way he always did now, one hand lightly brushing the doorframe, his cane tapping twice on the threshold. He stopped almost immediately. "Grace," he said. She didn't answer. "I can hear you breathing from across the room," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had spent years commanding boardrooms full of difficult people. "Sit down." "I'm fine," she whispered. "You're not fine, sit down." She sat, the chair scraped against the marble, and her hands gripped the edge of the table, and she couldn't stop them from trembling. James made his way to the chair across from her. He sat down, placed his cane against the table and folded his hands. He didn't speak, he just waited. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the cold silence of an empty house. It was the patient silence of someone offering space. "I didn't do it," Grace said finally, her voice cracked on the last word. "What they say I didn't do it." James said nothing, he listened. It came out slowly at first, then faster, like water breaking through a crack. The accounting firm where she had worked for 3 years. Her boss, a man named Victor Hale, who had been stealing from clients for over a decade. The falsified records placed on her computer. The anonymous tip to the police. The arrest warrant issued the same morning Victor transferred to a different state with a clean name and a full bank account. "He needed someone to take the fall," Grace said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "And I was nobody, so he chose me." James sat very still across from her. "You're not nobody," he said quietly, "not in this house." Grace didn't know about the phone calls until much later. They started that same night, after she had gone to her small room behind the kitchen and closed the door. She thought James had gone to bed. She thought the conversation at the kitchen table had ended the way most difficult conversations end, with silence and distance, and the quiet hope that morning would make everything feel less raw. She was wrong. James sat in his study on the 2nd floor, a room Grace had not yet been invited into, with his phone pressed to his ear. The room was dark, but darkness meant nothing to him anymore. It was the one advantage of blindness that no one ever talked about. You never needed to turn on a light. "Richard," he said when the line connected. His voice was different now, not the quiet, careful voice he used with Grace. This was the other voice, the one that had built a billion-dollar empire from a single construction contract, the one that made lawyers sit up straighter in their chairs without knowing why. "James," the voice on the other end was groggy, confused. It was past midnight. "I haven't heard from you in." "I need you to find everything you can on a man named Victor Hale," James said. "He ran an accounting firm, embezzlement, long-term. He framed an employee named Grace Anderson and disappeared. I want his current location, his financials, every client he ever stole from, and I want the original police file on Anderson." Silence on the other end. "James, are you?" "I'm not finished," James said. "I also want you to contact Diane Lockett-Porter and Associates. Tell her I'm retaining her firm for a criminal defense case. Tell her the client is innocent and the evidence will prove it. And tell her I'm paying." Another pause. "You haven't called me in 4 months. You fired your entire staff. Your cousin Marcus told everyone you were." "Richard," James's voice was quiet but absolute, the kind of quiet that closes doors. "I didn't call to discuss what Marcus told everyone. I called because a woman who had every reason to let me bleed on my own floor chose not to. And I am going to make sure the people who destroyed her life answer for it. Are we clear?" "We're clear," Richard said. James hung up. He sat in the dark study for a long time after that, his fingers resting on the phone, his cloudy eyes pointed at nothing. The house was silent around him. 50 rooms of silence, 4 months of silence. The kind of silence that had almost convinced him he had nothing left to offer the world. But his mind still worked. His money still moved. His name still opened doors that other people didn't even know existed. He had been sitting in the dark feeling useless for 4 months. Grace Anderson had walked into his house and reminded him, without meaning to, without even knowing she had done it, that a king doesn't stop being a king just because someone turned off the lights. They came on a Monday morning without warning. Grace was in the living room describing the layout of the bookshelves to James so he could find his way to the volumes he wanted without asking, when she heard the gates buzz. She went to the window and looked down the long driveway. 3 black cars, expensive, the kind that arrived in formation when people wanted to look important. "Someone's here," Grace said. 3 cars, they just came through the gate. James's hand tightened on his cane. "What kind of cars?" "Black new, the kind that cost more than most people's houses." James was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then his jaw set in that hard line Grace had learned to recognize. It was the expression he wore when something was about to be difficult, and he had already decided he was going to win. "That's Marcus," he said, and if Marcus brought 3 cars, he brought the board with him. "What do they want?" Grace asked. "My signature," James said, "on documents that would give them control of my company." He paused. "They've tried twice before, both times I had lawyers in the room, this time they're hopping I'm alone." Grace looked at the cars pulling up to the front entrance. Doors were opening. She counted 6 people. A tall man in a grey suit led the group, walking fast, the walk of someone who had already rehearsed what he was going to say. "You're not alone," Grace said quietly. James turned his head toward her voice. Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, but close. "No," he said, "I'm not. Tell me everything you see. Every face, every gesture, every document they put on the table. You are my eyes in this room, Grace, don't miss anything." They came through the front door without knocking. Marcus first, tall, sharp-featured, wearing confidence like cologne. Behind him, 4 board members in expensive suits and a woman carrying a leather folder thick with papers. "James," Marcus said, his voice bright and warm in the way that only fake warmth can be, "you're looking well." "I'm blind, Marcus," James said from his chair. "I'm not looking at anything, say what you came to say." Marcus glanced at Grace. His eyes moved over her simple clothes, her ponytail, her flat shoes. He dismissed her in half a second. That was his first mistake. "We've prepared transition documents," Marcus said, gesturing to the woman with the folder. "Given your condition, the board feels." "Page 3, Grace said softly from beside James's chair. "There's a clause transferring emergency decision-making authority to Marcus personally, not the board, just him." Marcus stopped mid-sentence. He stared at her. "Page 7, Grace continued, her voice calm and steady. "There's a provision that limits your access to company financial records permanently." The room went very still. James leaned forward in his chair. "Get out of my house, Marcus," he said quietly, "and take your paperwork with you. The next time you come here, my lawyers will be the ones answering the door." Nobody moved for 3 seconds. Then Marcus picked up the folder, turned, and walked out without another word. The cars were gone within 4 minutes. Marcus came back 3 days later, but this time he didn't bring paperwork. Grace was in the kitchen when she heard it. Not the smooth purr of luxury cars this time, but something sharper, more deliberate. She went to the window and felt her entire body turn to ice. 2 police cruisers, lights flashing, parked directly in front of the mansion's entrance. Behind them, Marcus's black sedan and Marcus himself standing beside it with his arms folded and a look on his face that Grace recognized immediately. It was the look of a man who believed he had already won. Next to him stood the woman from the board meeting, the one with the leather folder. She was holding something up, showing it to one of the officers. Grace couldn't see what it was from this distance, but she didn't need to. She already knew. Her legs went weak. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter and closed her eyes. 7 months of running. 7 months of sleeping under bridges and eating from shelters and moving every time someone looked at her too long. And now it was ending here, in the home of the one person who had treated her like a human being in longer than she could remember. She heard James's cane tapping in the hallway. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his head tilted slightly, reading the silence the way he always did. "What's happening?" he said. "Marcus is back," Grace said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He brought the police." James went very still. "He found out about me," Grace said. "He knows who I am, he knows about the warrant." She swallowed hard. "James, I have to go. If they find me here, they won't just arrest me. They'll use this against you. They'll say you're unfit. They'll say you're harboring a criminal. They'll take everything." "Grace," James said, "I can go out the back. The fence by the garden the same way I came in, if I leave now." "Grace," his voice cut through her panic like a blade through paper. Not loud, not harsh, just absolute. "You're not climbing any fences." "You don't understand," she said, and now her voice was breaking. "They will destroy you because of me." James walked into the kitchen. Each step was steady, deliberate, the walk of a man who knew exactly where every chair and counter and wall was because a woman with gentle hands and honest directions had taught him. He stopped directly in front of her. "Do you remember what you said to me the night we met?" he asked quietly. "You said stop, you said don't move, there's glass everywhere." Grace stared at him through blurred eyes. "I'm saying the same thing to you right now," James said. "Stop, don't move, there is glass everywhere and you cannot see it, but I can." Outside, car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps moved toward the front entrance. Someone knocked on the door, 3 firm, official knocks. James turned toward the sound. "Stay behind me," he said. James opened the front door himself. 2 officers stood on the steps. Behind them, Marcus leaned against his sedan with his arms crossed, watching like a man at a show he had paid good money to see. The board member beside him held a printed fugitive bulletin with Grace's photograph on it. "Mr. Williams," the first officer said carefully, the way people always spoke to James now, like blindness had also made him fragile. "We've received information that you may be harboring a wanted individual, a woman named Grace Anderson." "I know who Grace Anderson is," James said. "She's standing right behind me." The officers exchanged a glance. Marcus straightened up, surprise flickering across his face. He hadn't expected honesty. "She's been staying in my home for the past 2 weeks, James continued. His voice carried the calm, measured authority of a man who had negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars and had never once lost his composure at the table. "And before you reach for your handcuffs, I'd like you to speak with someone." He held up his phone. "Richard, go ahead." The voice that came through the speaker was crisp, precise, and unmistakably legal. "Officers, my name is Richard Calloway. I represent Mr. Williams. Standing by on this call is Diane Locke of Porter and Associates, who is representing Miss Anderson. We have filed an emergency motion this morning to vacate the arrest warrant for Grace Anderson based on new evidence." Marcus's smile disappeared. "Over the past 10 days, Richard continued, investigators retained by Mr. Williams have uncovered financial records proving that Victor Hale, Miss Anderson's former employer, systematically embezzled over $4.2 million from client accounts across a period of 11 years. The records that were placed on Miss Anderson's computer were planted. Digital forensics confirm the files were transferred from an external device, registered to Mr. Hale on the same evening. The anonymous tip was made to police." The officers looked at each other again. The first one lowered his hand from his belt. "Furthermore," Richard said, and now his voice sharpened, "we have filed a separate complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding Marcus Williams. Our investigation has revealed that Mr. Marcus Williams, in his capacity as informal financial advisor to Mr. James Williams, authorized 3 unauthorized transfers from Mr. Williams's personal accounts totaling $1.8 million over the past 4 months. We have the bank records. We have the signatures. And we have a forensic accountant ready to testify." Marcus took 1 step backward, then another. James stood in the doorway, his cloudy eyes pointed at nothing, his back straight, his voice perfectly steady. "Officers," he said, "you're welcome to verify everything my attorney has described. The documents have already been sent to your department, but I want to be very clear about something." He paused. "The criminal is not behind me. He's standing in my driveway." Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The officer turned slowly toward Marcus. "Sir," he said, "we're going to need you to stay where you are." Grace stood behind James in the doorway, tears running silently down her face, and watched the man who couldn't see a single thing dismantle every trap that had been set for both of them.